Welcome to Champion Stories. If this is your first time here, subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And now, on to today's story. The silence in the locker room felt heavier than the defeat itself. Manny Pacquiao sat on the cold metal bench, his gloves still damp with sweat and the sting of another loss etched across his weathered face. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting shadows that seemed to mock the emptiness surrounding him. Medical staff had already cleared out, reporters had been dismissed, and the arena was slowly emptying of the 18,000 souls who had witnessed his latest stumble in what many whispered might be the twilight of his legendary career. But it wasn't the loss that gnawed at Manny's chest like a persistent ache. It was the glaring absence of the one person who had never missed a moment like this in over 2 decades of their shared journey. Buboy Fernandez was nowhere to be found. For 23 years, Buboy had been more than just a trainer or cornerman. He had been Manny's anchor, the steady voice that guided him through the chaos of fame, the loyal friend who remembered the hungry kid from General Santos City when the rest of the world saw only the 8th Division champion. After every fight, win or lose, Buboy would be there with that familiar, reassuring presence, ready to analyze, encourage, or simply sit in comfortable silence as Manny processed another chapter of his boxing odyssey. Tonight, the corner where Buboy always stood felt cavernous. Manny's eyes traced the empty space where his friend should have been during those crucial final rounds. The memory of looking toward his corner for guidance and finding only concerned faces that weren't Buboy's sent a chill through his tired bones. He had fought the last 6 rounds feeling more alone than he had since his amateur days, when hunger was his only motivation and dreams were all he possessed. The notification on his phone had come just hours before the fight. A brief, uncharacteristic message from Buboy. Something urgent had come up. He couldn't make it to the arena, and he was sorry. No explanation, no phone call, just words on a screen that felt as foreign as they were impossible to believe. In 3 decades of knowing Buboy, Manny had never known him to miss anything important, let alone the biggest fight of the year. Team members had tried to fill the void, offering technical advice and encouragement, but their voices seemed to echo from a distance. The rhythm was wrong, the chemistry absent. Manny found himself searching the crowd between rounds, hoping to catch a glimpse of Buboy rushing through the arena aisles, delayed but determined to be there for the final moments. That glimpse never came. As Manny finally stood to leave the locker room, he noticed his phone had been buzzing with messages and missed calls. Reporters wanting statements, family members offering comfort, business associates discussing next steps. But scrolling through the notifications, he realized the one call he desperately wanted to see was missing. Buboy hadn't reached out since that cryptic message hours earlier. The drive back to his hotel took him through the neon-lit streets of Las Vegas, but Manny saw none of it. His mind kept replaying moments from the fight, when muscle memory made him turn toward Buboy's usual position, only to find empty space. The confusion in those split seconds had cost him precious focus, contributing to punches that landed clean and opportunities that slipped away. In his suite, Manny sat by the window overlooking the glittering city below. 23 years of shared victories and defeats, of building an empire from nothing, of transforming 2 kids from the Philippines into figures who commanded global respect. Whatever had pulled Buboy away tonight had to be significant, but the silence that followed felt ominous in ways that worried Manny more than any opponent ever had. The boxing world would wake up tomorrow analyzing his performance, questioning his future, debating his legacy. But Manny could only think about one question that mattered more than all the rest. Where was his friend? 3 days had passed since the fight, and Buboy's silence had transformed from concerning to alarming. Manny found himself checking his phone obsessively, refreshing message threads and redialing numbers that went straight to voicemail. The automated voice repeating that the subscriber was unavailable had become a haunting soundtrack to his growing anxiety. Back in his mansion in Forbes Park, Manila, Manny paced the marble floors of his study, surrounded by championship belts and photographs that documented decades of triumph. In nearly every image, Buboy appeared somewhere in the frame, sometimes in the background adjusting equipment, other times standing proudly beside Manny during victory celebrations. The consistency of his presence in these frozen moments made his current absence feel even more profound. Manny had reached out to everyone in their shared circle. Freddie Roach expressed genuine concern, but admitted he hadn't heard from Buboy since their training camp ended. Team members, sparring partners, and gym staff all echoed the same story. Buboy had seemed normal in the days leading up to the fight, focused and engaged as always. The mysterious urgent matter that had pulled him away remained unexplained. The search led Manny to Buboy's modest apartment in Quezon City, a place he had visited countless times over the years for strategy sessions and casual dinners. The building manager, an elderly man named Teofilo, recognized Manny immediately. Despite his attempts to remain inconspicuous behind dark sunglasses and a baseball cap, his weathered hands shook slightly as he explained that Buboy had left 3 days ago carrying a single duffel bag, mentioning only that he needed to handle family business in the provinces. Standing in the hallway outside Buboy's locked apartment, Manny felt the weight of 23 years of friendship pressing against his chest. Behind that door lay remnants of a life built around boxing, around their shared journey from poverty to prominence. Photo albums filled with memories, training notebooks documenting strategies and observations, personal belongings that told the story of a man who had devoted his existence to helping others achieve their dreams. The apartment manager's sister, Carmela, worked as a cleaner in the building and had noticed Buboy's unusual behavior in recent weeks. She mentioned seeing him taking phone calls at odd hours, conversations that seemed to leave him troubled and distracted. The calls had become more frequent as the fight approached, and she remembered watching him pace the parking lot late one evening, his normally calm demeanor replaced by obvious agitation. Manny drove through the familiar streets of Manila, searching for any trace of understanding. He visited their old gym in General Santos City, hoping longtime associates might provide insight. The facility held countless memories of their early days together, when hungry young fighters trained on worn equipment, and dreams were the only currency that mattered. Older trainers remembered Buboy as intensely loyal, someone who never missed commitments and always honored his word. Each conversation deepened the mystery, rather than resolving it. Buboy's sudden departure contradicted everything people knew about his character. The man who had never missed a significant moment in Manny's career, who had sacrificed personal opportunities to remain dedicated to their partnership, had vanished without proper explanation during one of their most challenging periods. That evening, Manny found himself in his private chapel, seeking solace in prayer and reflection. The quiet space had always provided clarity during difficult times, but tonight, even spiritual comfort felt elusive. His thoughts kept returning to Buboy's cryptic final message, analyzing each word for hidden meaning. The phrase, "something urgent," could encompass countless possibilities, but none explained the continued silence that followed. As midnight approached, Manny made a decision that felt both necessary and terrifying. If Buboy wouldn't reach out, if traditional channels provided no answers, then he would have to dig deeper into his friend's life than their relationship had ever required. The truth, whatever it might be, deserved to be uncovered. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Manny's home office as he spread documents across his mahogany desk, transforming the space into an impromptu investigation center. Bank statements, phone records, and contact lists formed an unusual constellation of clues that felt both invasive and necessary. Never in 23 years had he imagined needing to scrutinize his closest friend's life for answers. But Buboy's continued silence left no alternative. What Manny discovered in those financial records challenged everything he thought he knew about his loyal companion. Regular monthly transfers to an address in Mindanao, amounts that seemed substantial for someone of Buboy's modest lifestyle. The payments had continued for over 15 years, predating even some of their biggest purses together. Each transaction bore the same recipient name, Esperanza Fernandez. The revelation sent Manny's mind racing through decades of shared conversations, searching for any mention of family members beyond the basic details Buboy had always provided. He had spoken occasionally of distant relatives in the provinces, but never with the specificity or emotional connection that such consistent financial support would suggest. The discovery felt like uncovering a hidden room in a house he had visited countless times. Further investigation revealed property records showing that Esperanza Fernandez owned a small medical facility in Cagayan de Oro, a modest establishment that provided care for patients with chronic conditions. The facility had been operational for nearly 2 decades, and public records indicated it served primarily low-income families who couldn't afford private health care. The connection between this facility and Buboy's regular payments began forming a picture that explained his mysterious financial commitments. Manny's assistant, Roberto, had quietly reached out to contacts in Mindanao without revealing the true nature of their inquiry. The information that came back painted a complex portrait of Buboy's hidden life. Esperanza Fernandez was indeed family. His younger sister, who had pursued nursing and eventually established the medical center with funding from an anonymous benefactor. Local residents spoke of her dedication to serving the community's most vulnerable members, never turning away patients, regardless of their ability to pay. The medical facility's patient registry revealed another startling truth that made Manny's chest tighten with understanding. Among the long-term patients was a man named Crispin Fernandez, whose admission date coincided almost exactly with the beginning of Buboy's regular financial transfers. The medical records, obtained through careful inquiries, indicated severe cognitive decline following a workplace accident that had left him requiring constant care. Manny sat back in his chair, pieces of a puzzle finally arranging themselves into a coherent picture. Buboy had been supporting not just his sister's medical facility, but specifically funding the care of their father, a man whose condition had deteriorated over the years, while Buboy traveled the world as Manny's cornerman. The weight of that responsibility, carried silently for so many years, explained the mysterious phone calls and growing agitation that the building manager's sister had observed. The timeline became clearer as Manny cross-referenced dates and payments. Recent medical records showed Crispin's condition had worsened significantly in the past month, requiring intensive intervention that had strained the facility's resources. The urgent calls Buboy had been receiving weren't about business opportunities or personal problems. They were about his father's failing health and the difficult decisions that such circumstances demanded. Understanding flooded through Manny like a wave of both relief and guilt. Relief that Buboy's disappearance stemmed from family crisis rather than abandonment or betrayal. Guilt that his closest friend had carried such a profound burden alone, never feeling comfortable enough to share the complete truth about his personal struggles. The man who had given everything to support Manny's career had been simultaneously managing a family tragedy that required equal dedication and resources. As evening approached, Manny found himself studying recent photos of their training sessions with new eyes. Buboy's occasional distant expressions, moments when he seemed mentally elsewhere despite his physical presence, now carried different meaning. The slight fatigue that Manny had attributed to their intense schedule might have reflected the emotional exhaustion of managing two demanding responsibilities simultaneously. The revelation brought clarity but also deeper concern. If Buboy's father's condition had reached a critical stage, the coming days would test his friend in ways that no boxing match ever could. The flight to Cagayan de Oro felt longer than any international journey Manny had taken for championship fights. As the plane descended through scattered clouds toward Mindanao, he pressed his face against the small window, watching the familiar landscape of his homeland unfold below. Palm trees swayed in coastal breezes, and modest communities dotted the terrain like patches of resilience against poverty's persistent challenges. Somewhere in this vast expanse, his closest friend was facing the most difficult fight of his life. Manny had traveled alone, declining his usual security detail and staff accompaniment. This mission required discretion and personal attention that public recognition would complicate. Wearing simple clothes and a worn baseball cap, he hoped to blend into the provincial atmosphere where celebrity status might feel intrusive during such a delicate family crisis. The taxi ride from the airport wound through streets that reminded Manny of his own humble beginnings in General Santos City. Vendors sold fresh produce from makeshift stalls, children played in narrow alleys between concrete houses, and the rhythm of everyday survival played out in scenes that success had never erased from his memory. This was the Philippines that had shaped both him and Buboy, the environment that had taught them the value of loyalty, hard work, and family obligation. The medical facility stood on a quiet street, lined with modest homes and small businesses. The two-story building bore simple signage identifying it as the Esperanza Community Health Center, and its clean but unpretentious appearance reflected the practical approach of someone focused on service rather than profit. A small garden in front displayed colorful flowers that seemed to welcome patients with gentle beauty amid their health struggles. Manny observed the facility from across the street, noting the steady stream of patients and family members entering and leaving throughout the afternoon. Elderly individuals moved slowly with the support of relatives. Mothers carried young children, and the general atmosphere suggested a place where people found genuine care rather than just medical procedures. The scene validated what his research had revealed about Esperanza's dedication to serving her community's most vulnerable members. As evening approached, Manny finally spotted a familiar figure emerging from the building's side entrance. Buboy appeared thinner than usual, his normally confident posture replaced by the weighted gait of someone carrying enormous emotional burden. His clothes were wrinkled, suggesting he had been sleeping at the facility, and his face bore the exhaustion of someone who hadn't experienced proper rest in days. Watching his friend from a distance, Manny felt a mixture of relief and heartbreak. Relief that Buboy was safe and physically unharmed. Heartbreak at witnessing the toll that hidden family responsibilities had extracted from someone who had always appeared unshakably strong. The man who had provided unwavering support during Manny's most challenging moments was now navigating his own crisis with the same quiet determination that had defined their partnership. Buboy walked to a small food stall nearby, purchasing simple items that he carried back into the facility. His movements suggested routine, indicating he had been maintaining this pattern for several days. The dedication was admirable, but clearly unsustainable, as evidenced by his deteriorating physical condition and the obvious stress etched across his features. Manny remained across the street as darkness settled over the neighborhood, contemplating his next move. Approaching Buboy directly might seem like an invasion of privacy during such a personal crisis, yet allowing his friend to continue struggling alone contradicted everything their decades-long partnership had represented. The loyalty Buboy had shown him deserved reciprocation, regardless of how uncomfortable the situation might initially feel. The lights in the medical facility continued glowing late into the evening, suggesting that critical care was being provided around the clock. Through windows, Manny could see silhouettes of medical staff and family members maintaining their vigils beside patients who required constant attention. Somewhere in that building, the man who had been Buboy's strongest motivation for the past 15 years was fighting a battle that no championship belt could influence. Tomorrow, Manny would cross the street and face whatever truth awaited inside those walls. The morning arrived with a gentle rain that seemed to wash the previous day's heat from the streets of Cagayan de Oro. Manny stood outside the Esperanza Community Health Center, his heart hammering against his ribs with an intensity that rivaled pre-fight nerves. Through the glass doors, he could see the bustling activity of a medical facility in full operation. Nurses moving efficiently between rooms, family members maintaining quiet vigils, and the steady rhythm of care that defined places where life's most vulnerable moments played out. Taking a deep breath, Manny pushed through the entrance and approached the reception desk. The young woman behind the counter, whose name tag identified her as Luisa, looked up with the practiced smile of someone accustomed to greeting worried families and patients seeking help. Her expression shifted to recognition, then surprise, as she realized who stood before her, but professional training kept her composure intact as she inquired about the purpose of his visit. Manny explained that he was looking for Buboy Fernandez, describing him as a close friend who had been staying at the facility. Luisa's face softened with understanding, and she gestured toward a hallway that led to the long-term care wing. Her quiet instructions guided him to room 247, where he would find the answers he had traveled across the country to discover. The walk down the sterile corridor felt interminable, each step bringing him closer to a confrontation he wasn't sure how to handle. Through partially open doors, he glimpsed scenes that reminded him of the fragility that success often concealed. Elderly patients receiving physical therapy, families gathered around bedsides, and medical staff providing comfort during moments when medicine alone couldn't heal. Room 247 sat at the end of the hallway, its door slightly ajar to allow natural light from the window to spill into the corridor. Manny paused outside, hearing the soft sounds of someone moving around inside, accompanied by the gentle mechanical hum of medical equipment. Through the narrow opening, he could see Buboy sitting beside a hospital bed, his back turned toward the door as he attended to the figure lying beneath crisp white sheets. The man in the bed bore a resemblance to Buboy that spoke of shared genetics, but time and illness had carved deep lines across his face and left his hair completely gray. Crispin Fernandez lay with his eyes closed, his breathing steady but shallow, while various monitors tracked his vital signs with quiet electronic precision. The scene carried the weight of a vigil that had been maintained for days, possibly weeks, as his condition deteriorated beyond what medical intervention could reverse. Buboy moved with the careful efficiency of someone who had learned to provide basic care through necessity rather than training. He adjusted pillows, checked IV lines, and maintained the small rituals that brought dignity to his father's final days. His movements were tender but exhausted, revealing the physical and emotional toll of serving as both son and caregiver during such a prolonged crisis. Manny stepped quietly into the room, his presence announced only by the soft sound of his footsteps on the polished floor. Buboy turned slowly, his face cycling through surprise, embarrassment, and finally a resigned acceptance that his carefully guarded secret had been discovered. The two men regarded each other across the sterile space, 23 years of friendship, creating a communication that required no words. The reunion carried none of the anger or hurt that Manny had anticipated during his journey. Instead, he felt overwhelming compassion for his friend's impossible situation and deep respect for the sacrifice that had been made in silence. Buboy's absence from the fight suddenly seemed not like abandonment, but like the ultimate expression of the loyalty and dedication that had defined their entire relationship. In that hospital room, surrounded by the quiet sounds of medical equipment and the weight of impending loss, both men understood that their partnership had always been about more than boxing. It had been about two people supporting each other through life's most challenging moments, regardless of what championships or recognition might be at stake. The silence that stretched between them carried the weight of decades, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Manny moved slowly toward the second chair beside Crispin's bed, settling into it with the quiet reverence of someone entering a sacred space. Buboy's eyes glistened with unshed tears, not from embarrassment at being discovered, but from the relief of no longer carrying his burden alone. Crispin's breathing filled the room with its steady rhythm, occasionally interrupted by the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. His face, peaceful in unconsciousness, bore the weathered features of a man who had worked with his hands for most of his life. Calluses on his palms and arms told stories of labor and sacrifice, the same qualities that had shaped his son's character and dedication. Manny studied the medical charts hanging at the foot of the bed, piecing together the progression of his friend's father's condition over the past several months. The neurological decline had accelerated recently, transforming what had been manageable long-term care into an around-the-clock vigil. Each notation revealed the careful attention being provided by the medical staff, but also the inevitable trajectory toward an outcome that no amount of love or resources could prevent. Buboy resumed his quiet ministrations, adjusting blankets and checking the positioning of pillows with movements that spoke of practice gained through necessity. His clothes were rumpled from sleeping in the chair, and his face showed the exhaustion of someone who hadn't allowed himself proper rest in days. The dedication was admirable but clearly unsustainable, a pattern that would lead to his own physical breakdown if maintained much longer. As afternoon transitioned into evening, Esperanza entered the room carrying fresh linens and medical supplies. Her resemblance to Buboy was unmistakable, and her gentle efficiency suggested years of experience managing similar situations. She acknowledged Manny's presence with a respectful nod, clearly understanding who he was, but maintaining the professional discretion that such circumstances required. Watching the siblings work together, Manny gained insight into the family dynamics that had shaped Buboy's character. Their movements around their father's bed demonstrated a partnership built on shared responsibility and mutual support. Esperanza's medical facility wasn't just a business venture, it was a family's response to tragedy, a way of transforming personal crisis into community service. The evening brought a shift change among the nursing staff, and Manny observed the seamless transition of care that ensured Crispin's comfort remained consistent throughout the night. The facility operated with the efficiency of a larger hospital, but maintained the personal attention that only came from genuine concern for individual patients. Every staff member who entered the room treated Crispin with dignity and respect, creating an environment where families could focus on emotional support rather than medical logistics. As midnight approached, Buboy finally succumbed to exhaustion, his head settling against the back of his chair as sleep overtook him. Manny remained awake, watching over both his friend and his friend's father, understanding that his role had shifted from seeking answers to providing support during an impossible situation. The monitors continued their quiet symphony throughout the night, marking time in a space where past and future seemed suspended. Manny found himself reflecting on the sacrifices that loyalty demanded, the hidden struggles that even closest friends sometimes carried alone, and the way that true partnership revealed itself not in moments of triumph, but during periods of profound difficulty. By dawn, he had made a decision that felt as natural as breathing. Whatever time remained in this vigil, whatever support Buboy needed during the coming days, Manny would provide it. 23 years of friendship had prepared him for many things, but nothing had been more important than being present during this moment, when presence was all that mattered. 3 days had passed since Manny's arrival at the medical facility, and he had settled into the rhythm of hospital life with surprising adaptability. His world of championship belts and international arenas had been replaced by the quiet urgency of medical care, where victories were measured in comfortable hours rather than decisive rounds. The stark fluorescent lighting and antiseptic smells had become familiar, creating a new normal that centered entirely on supporting his friend through an ordeal that no training could have prepared either of them to face. Manny had taken over many of the practical responsibilities that Buboy had been shouldering alone. He coordinated with medical staff, handled administrative paperwork, and ensured that meals were delivered regularly to sustain them through the long hours of waiting. His celebrity status had initially caused some disruption among staff and other families, but his genuine humility and respectful behavior quickly earned him acceptance as simply another concerned relative maintaining a bedside vigil. The transformation in his daily routine felt profound but strangely meaningful. Instead of morning training sessions, he found himself learning to assist with basic patient care under the guidance of the nursing staff. His hands, which had delivered powerful punches to world-class opponents, now gently helped adjust pillows and provided comfort during medical procedures. The contrast highlighted how much of life's real significance occurred far from public recognition or financial reward. Crispin's condition had deteriorated noticeably since Manny's arrival. The periods of apparent consciousness had become shorter and less frequent, while his breathing required increasing mechanical assistance. The medical team, led by Dr. Aurelio Santos, maintained professional optimism while privately acknowledging that the trajectory pointed toward an outcome that everyone understood, but no one wanted to voice explicitly. Buboy had finally begun accepting proper rest periods, trusting Manny to maintain the constant presence that their father's condition required. The relief of shared responsibility had allowed some of the tension to leave his shoulders, though his eyes still carried the weight of impending loss. He moved through the room with practiced efficiency, but Manny noticed moments when grief threatened to overwhelm his careful composure. The other families in the facility had welcomed Manny into their informal community of caregivers. During meal breaks in the small cafeteria, he listened to stories that reminded him of the universal nature of human struggle. A woman named Milagros was caring for her husband following a stroke. An elderly man called Florencio maintained vigil over his wife of 50 years as she battled advanced illness. Each story reinforced how much courage existed in ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Esperanza had become a source of quiet strength for everyone in the facility, moving between rooms with medical expertise and emotional support that seemed inexhaustible. Her interactions with Manny revealed the depth of gratitude she felt for her brother's years of financial support, but also her concern about how he had sacrificed personal relationships and opportunities to fund their father's care. The medical facility represented not just professional achievement, but a family's response to crisis through service to others facing similar struggles. As evening settled over the facility for the third consecutive day, Manny found himself reflecting on perspectives that success had never provided. The intensity of maintaining hope while preparing for loss created emotional complexity that made boxing's psychological demands seem simple by comparison. Victory and defeat in the ring were clear outcomes with definite timelines, but the hospital required sustaining effort indefinitely, while accepting that some battles couldn't be won through determination alone. The monitors continued their steady surveillance of Crispin's vital signs, but the numbers had been trending downward despite all medical interventions. Manny understood that their vigil was approaching its most difficult phase, when presence and love would matter more than any treatment or procedure. Tomorrow would likely bring decisions that no family ever wanted to face. The end came quietly in the pre-dawn hours of the fifth day, as Crispin Fernandez drew his final breath, surrounded by the three people who had shaped his life's final chapter. Manny held Buboy's hand as they watched the monitors flatline, the mechanical symphony that had provided constant background music, finally falling silent. In that sterile room, filled with medical equipment and the lingering presence of unconditional love, the boxing world's most celebrated partnership discovered a truth that transcended any championship. Esperanza handled the immediate medical protocols with professional composure, but her tears revealed the personal loss beneath her clinical training. The staff moved through their procedures with respectful efficiency, understanding that they were witnessing the conclusion of a family's long journey through illness and devotion. The dignity they provided during those final moments reflected the culture of care that had made the facility a sanctuary for families facing similar ordeals. In the days that followed, Manny witnessed Buboy's transformation from caregiver back to the confident trainer who had guided champions for decades. The funeral arrangements, conducted in a small chapel in Cagayan de Oro, brought together communities that Crispin had touched through his work and his children's service. Local residents, medical staff, and former colleagues gathered to honor a man whose legacy lived not in public recognition, but in the quiet impact of integrity and hard work. Standing beside the grave as red earth covered the simple wooden casket, Manny understood why Buboy had disappeared during the fight. The choice between supporting a friend's career ambitions and being present for a father's final days had never been a choice at all. Family obligation superseded professional commitment, even when that commitment involved loyalty to someone who had become family through shared dreams and mutual respect. The journey back to Manila provided time for reflection that changed Manny's perspective on everything he had previously considered important. Boxing had given him wealth, fame, and global recognition, but it had also created a bubble that insulated him from the everyday struggles that defined most people's lives. Watching Buboy sacrifice personal comfort to ensure his father's dignity had demonstrated courage that surpassed anything displayed in any ring. When news of their reunion finally reached the boxing media, the story that emerged moved the sports community in ways that no championship victory had ever achieved. Buboy's silent sacrifice, Manny's loyal support, and their shared commitment to family values created a narrative that transcended athletic competition. Fans around the world responded to the authenticity of their friendship, understanding that true partnership meant presence during life's most difficult moments. 3 weeks later, as they resumed training for Manny's next fight, their relationship carried new depth. Buboy's corner instructions would forever be informed by perspectives gained during those hospital vigils, while Manny's approach to competition had been enriched by understanding what actually constituted victory. The boxing world continued its relentless focus on rankings and purses, but their partnership now operated with knowledge that some fights were won through presence rather than punches. In quiet moments between training sessions, both men knew they had discovered something that no championship belt could represent: the truth that loyalty, sacrifice, and family create legacies that outlast any sporting achievement. That truth, born in a hospital room in Mindanao, had indeed moved their corner of the boxing world towards something far more meaningful than victory. Thank you for watching another episode of Champion Stories. If you enjoyed today's story, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming inspiring tales about Manny Pacquiao. Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one, and many times your ideas inspire our next episode. See you next time.